Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a deep dive, and I mean really asterisk deep dive, back in time. We're setting our time machine for 1.7 million years ago, to a world that was both familiar and wildly different from our own. We often imagine this era as a grand stage for our early ancestors, the hominids, as they took their first upright steps towards dominating the planet. We picture them battling saber-toothed cats and hunting mammoths. But what about the other, less talked about creatures that shared their world? What about the daily, less dramatic struggles for survival? Today, we re-zooming in on a fascinating and spiky relationship, the one between early hominids and the ferocious prehistoric porcupine. Let's set the scene. We're in the early Pleistocene, a time of dramatic climate shifts. Ice ages were coming and going, reshaping landscapes across the globe. In Africa, the cradle of humanity, vast savannas stretched out, dotted with woodlands and crisscrossed by rivers. This was the world of Homo erectus one of our most successful early ancestors. They were taller, had larger brains than their predecessors, and were masters of tool-making. They crafted the Achillean hand axes, versatile tools that were the Swiss army knives of their time. They were intelligent, cooperative, and expanding their territories, but they weren't alone. Every bush, every cave, every watering hole held a new challenge, and one of the prickliest of these was the giant African porcupine. Now, when you think of a porcupine, you probably picture the cute, somewhat clumsy rodent we know today. But the porcupines of 1.7 million years ago were a different beast entirely. We're talking about creatures that were significantly larger and more robust than their modern descendants. Imagine a porcupine the size of a small pig, armed with a formidable arsenal of quills that were longer, thicker, and sharper than anything you'd see today. These weren't just defensive tools. They were lethal weapons. Each quill was a finely tuned spear, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. For any predator, including our hominid ancestors, a run-in with one of these walking fortresses was a serious and potentially fatal encounter. So here's the million-year-old question. Why on earth would our ancestors even bother with such a dangerous animal? The answer, as is often the case in prehistory, comes down to one word: survival. In the harsh environment of the Pleistocene, every calorie counted. Hominids were omnivores, and their diet was a mix of whatever they could gather, scavenge, or hunt. While a big game hunt for an antelope or a buffalo was a high-reward activity, it was also incredibly high risk. A failed hunt meant wasted energy and potential injury. Scavenging from the kills of larger predators like lions or hyenas was another option, but that came with its own set of dangers. You had to be quick, strong, and smart to steal a meal from the top predators of the savanna. This is where the porcupine enters the picture. While incredibly dangerous to hunt directly, porcupines offered a unique opportunity. They are nocturnal and spend their days in burrows or caves. What if an early human could find a porcupine's den? And what if that porcupine had been killed by another predator or died of natural causes inside its burrow? Suddenly, you have a relatively safe stationary source of protein and fat, protected from other scavengers by the very den it called home. It was a high-value prize. The meat would have been a crucial source of energy, and the fat was essential for brain development, a key factor in our own evolution. So the risk of dealing with those quills started to look a lot more appealing when weighed against the reward of a guaranteed meal. The evidence for these interactions is fascinating and comes from a place called Swartkrans Cave in South Africa. This site is a treasure trove of fossils, a window into the lives of early hominids and the animals they lived with. Archaeologists digging there found something incredible: porcupine bones mixed in with hominid fossils and their stone tools. But here's the kicker: many of these porcupine bones had cut marks on them. These weren't random scratches. These were deliberate marks made by stone tools, clear evidence that hominids were butchering these animals. They were systematically stripping the meat from the bones. This tells us that hominids weren't just occasionally bumping into porcupines. They were actively processing them for food. But how did they do it? How did they get past that terrifying coat of armor? The cut marks at Swartkrans provide some clues. Researchers noticed that the marks were concentrated on the underside of the porcupine, on the head, and on the lower limbs areas with fewer or no quills. This suggests a very specific and intelligent strategy. It's unlikely they were hunting these giant porcupines head-on. A charging porcupine moving backward with its quills raised would be a nightmare for a hominid armed only with a hand axe and a rock. It's far more probable that they were scavenging. They would find a porcupine that was already dead, or perhaps they learned to trap them or corner them in their dens. Once the animal was neutralized, the real work began. Using their sharp stone tools, they would carefully flip the animal onto its back, exposing the soft, vulnerable belly. From there, they could skin it and access the rich meat and organs underneath, all while avoiding the dangerous quills on the back. This required foresight, planning, and a deep understanding of the animal's anatomy. It wasn't just brute force. It was a display of intelligence. They had figured out the porcupine's weakness and developed a technique to exploit it. This process shows a level of problem-solving and technical skill that was a hallmark of Homo erectus. They were thinking, strategizing, and passing this knowledge down through generations. This relationship wasn't a one-way street, however. The danger was very real. While we have evidence of hominids eating porcupines, it's also entirely possible that porcupines occasionally got the better of the hominids. A single well-placed quill could cause a deep puncture wound. In a world without antibiotics or modern medicine, such a wound could easily become infected, leading to a slow, painful death. Imagine a young hominid, perhaps a bit too bold, trying to poke a porcupine out of its burrow. A flick of the tail, a quill embedded in a leg or an arm, and their fate could be sealed. This constant dance with danger shaped our ancestors' behavior. It taught them caution, respect for the natural world, and the importance of working together. A lone individual might fall victim to a porcupine's defense, but a group could work together to minimize the risk and secure the meal. This complex interaction is a perfect microcosm of early human life. It wasn't all epic mammoth hunts. A huge part of their existence was about clever opportunism. It was about understanding the environment in minute detail, knowing which plants were edible, which animals were too dangerous to hunt, and which ones offered a clever loophole for a determined and intelligent primate. The story of the hominid and the porcupine is a story of risk versus reward, of ingenuity overcoming a natural defense. It shows us that our ancestors were not just hunters of the biggest game, but also master scavengers and resourceful foragers. They were ecological geniuses in their own right. So the next time you see a porcupine, take a moment to appreciate the ancient story it represents. It is a living link to a time when our own ancestors had to outsmart one of nature's most perfectly defended creatures just to get a meal. It is a reminder that the path of human evolution wasn't a straight line to the top of the food chain. It was a winding, challenging, and often spiky road filled with incredible moments of innovation and survival. The skills they learned in these encounters, patience, strategy, tool use, and cooperation, were the very skills that allowed us to thrive and eventually become the species we are today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to the Pleistocene. What do you think? Could you have outsmarted a giant prehistoric porcupine? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into our ancient past, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next adventure. We've got so much more to explore together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.